Network-SMTN.
How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Shin Megami Tensei Network Link 152. I'm your host, Spencer Presley, and joining me on this very special episode is Hagane from the Velvet Network, who I recently was introduced to.
Hello guys, I'm Hagane from the Velvet Network, the Spanish-speaking community of Megami Tensei and Persona.
Yeah, so I recently, like I said, I recently just found out about you thanks to LaRue posting your recent Catherine video you had uploaded. And in case anyone out there doesn't really know about the Velvet Network and what you guys do, how long have you guys been sort of operating and what got you interested in starting the Velvet Network?
We are like 2 years, operating like 2 years from the launch of Persona 5 in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm managing the Velvet Network like the ending of 2017. This is gonna. Our project is basically do podcast, post news, and all sorts of things Megami Tensei and Atlus related.
I gotta say, it's really funny that you mentioned when you started was around the release of P5. I feel a lot less bad in the sense of that's why I hadn't really heard of you guys much before, because that's kind of, I'd say, I was a little, oh, I wouldn't even say a little, I was a lot less involved in the Megami Tensei community from like the release of Persona 5 to like summer of this year. Just for like personal reasons, which wasn't even like, oh, I didn't want to be like kind of involved with it. It was just like a lot of personal stuff for it. But just because I, as primarily just a native English speaker, I'm just kind of curious, what is at least for you in like the Spanish speaking community, what was like your first introduction to the series, if anything at all, really, that kind of stands out in your mind?
My first introduction to Megami Tensei series was Catherine in 2011, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Then I love it. I love Catherine. It's my favorite game. I have all sorts of things. A Vincent cosplay. Then I played Persona 3 and 4. I really loved it. I play all the spin-off games since 2011, and then in 2013 I buy a 3DS specifically for Shin Megami Tensei 4 and Fire Emblem Awakening. So I take those $13 of credit, $30 of credits. Sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, I remember that year with Awakening and Shin Megami Tensei 4 was just kind of like a crazy, like, sort of like whirlwind of attention with everybody, kind of like either getting sucked into both series or a lot of new people getting like into one. I know, at least for all of my local friends, unfortunately, everyone I knew was playing Fire Emblem, and I was the only one playing Shin Megami Tensei 4. Because I think at least at the time, especially back in 2013, if you look at the release for it, like Fire Emblem had a bit of a reputation for being really difficult, but at least in terms of the Western media coverage, was like Shin Megami Tensei was like trying to play the Dark Souls of Dark Souls, which is like the worst comparison ever for it.
The Dark Souls of the Persona games.
Oh
the
man,
that Persona.
Those quotes like still make me cringe to this day thinking about that.
I made the Strange Journey one. That's floating around.
No,
The Dark Souls of Persona Q. The Dark Souls of Persona Q.
No, I'd say actually the Dark Souls Persona Q is actually just Etrian Odyssey, but then that would involve people playing Etrian Odyssey. I gotta ask though, just because Catherine is also one of my favorite Atlas games of all time. What was your sort of reaction to Full Body? Just because I feel like Catherine had a lot of anticipation when Full Body got announced back in. It's so crazy to think it got announced 2017. It got announced in winter of 2017, which like. I feel like I was in such a different space mentally, like, oh man, it's gonna come out 2018. But then it kind of feels like by the time it came out in September of this year for us, pretty much the hardcores all played it, and then no one new really touched
it. I think that the announcement of Catherine Full Body, really. The one thing is that Catherine is pretty popular in Spain, because most of the really is pretty popular in Spain, because most of the big YouTubers played Catherine at that time.
I'm just kind of curious, like, what do you think sort of led to that? Was it just like the concept of the game in general? I know with like in America, even when Catherine got announced at like TGS a couple years back, just because it being like the first HD game from the studio behind Persona, and like the game being about relationships, I know it caught a lot of people's attention for being like really risque, which is kind of funny when you think about it like all these years later.
I think it's the more mature cast of characters, and sort of the gameplay. People don't often play Atlus games because they are turn-based. I think that, and being the first HD AAA Atlus title of the generation, it was pretty visually, and the game visually still today. It's still today gorgeous. Sorry.
No, you're okay. Just curious, because I have to ask this because I'm a huge fanboy for the PlayStation Vita at all. Were you disappointed the West didn't get Full Body on the Vita and only on PS4?
Yes, I was pretty disappointed to the launch of the Catherine Full Body Vita version in the West. Really, I was in Japan this February, I think. Yes, February it is. And they were selling and doing events from Catherine Full Body. I played it in Japan.
I was gonna say if you had checked it out, because I'm really glad I'd imported it even on Vita, just because playing that game, especially having already played through it once in English, like there is already so much English text and voice already in the Japanese version of that game. I didn't really lose too much out besides the story, and I cannot ever stress that enough, like how good that game looks on the Vita. Like it's not like, oh, it looks good as a port from a PS3 game, whereas like it looks good even compared to the PS4 version.
I think it looks pretty well and runs pretty well.
Yeah, the only real concession besides like I think the resolution, obviously, and the frame rate is like 30 as opposed to 60, but it basically ruined ever going back to classic Catherine for me, at least in terms of like the gameplay and stuff for it.
And in terms of
oh, sorry, you go.
Sorry. For the story standpoint and the new added things for Full Body, I think that Rin is pretty well implemented for being a Mary.
See. I'm very oddly divided on Rin. I actually really loved her new route and story, and I think she's implemented pretty well considering a lot of the other new characters, how they've been implemented in other Atlas games like Marie and Alex. But my only weird complaint with her is I feel like she is really, really good all the way up until you get her true ending. And like the more you kept finding out about her, it was like, okay, this is very rewarding, blah blah blah. Without getting really into spoilers for anyone who hasn't played it, is I thought it was a really good ending until you get to the true ending and find out what Ren really is, and then I feel like it kind of takes away from the whole reveal, at least personally. Like, what did you think of Ren's true reveal?
I think the Ren ruined for me the claustrophobic sense of Catherine, like you were between the sword and the wall.
Mm-hmm.
She's like the third parent.
Yeah, and I will say, to anyone who has imported or had to play this game outside of your original, if you are not very well, if you're not very fluent in Japanese or English, without a guide, I have no idea how you would ever naturally find Ren's true path. Her ending is very specific to get.
Yeah.
Because I remember I tried getting it on the Japanese one for my first playthrough, and I just ended up with the most sad, depressing single Vincent ending.
The answers are pretty specific for his ending.
I will say though, it is very funny because basically if you don't go out of your way for Ren, the way they write her out of the story, it basically is like, oh, the character just disappeared.
Thanos.
She's the best comparison. Ren gets Thanos out of the whole world because like the last conversation you could possibly have with her, if you're going for Catherine with a K or a C, is like that phone call. And then at any point if you're playing, you're like, so she's gonna come back, right? No, she's dead. She didn't. You're back to the 360 PS3 story now.
I hope that Kasumi isn't like that.
I'm very, very curious about that. Yeah, because Kasumi, they're gonna have her be a lot more implemented in the story, at least in the aspect of she is a student at your school. You're going to have to see her a lot more. She's not just going to be mysterious red-haired girl number 3
with amnesia.
Oh God, yes, that's
like
true.
every adult spin-off and re-release.
Because of course, the only way they can not remember not being in the original release is if they have amnesia, just like you. Final little bit about Catherine. I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about this more, just through circumstance. But with the original release, were you originally a Catherine with a C or a Catherine with a K person?
K, absolutely.
Really? Well, what made you
Really?
What made you more tied to Catherine with a K?
They are partners. I like that in a relationship. I don't know how to describe it.
I liked a lot of the aspects of. I think actually this is a little weird. So I originally was C Catherine for my first playthrough, way back in 2011, but I think Full Body does a better job of giving you more reason to want to stay faithful to K Catherine. I don't think the flashbacks are perfect, but I think it definitely does flesh out her character a little bit more, because if I had to be more critical of the original release, K Catherine is basically like kind of depicted as just a stick in the mud, like nagging girlfriend for most of it, and it's kind of hard to feel guilty even as you're cheating on her.
I think the flashbacks are good. I like it.
My only actual complaint with the flashbacks is somehow they are new in terms of Studio 4C animated them, but they look visually worse than the ones from 8 years ago.
Oh, it's like the Persona 4 Golden case. Like all the Persona 4 Vanilla looks like pretty bad compared to the new ones.
It's kind of it's so weird because at least like I can kind of understand it for being the same studio and like different kind of budgets and stuff for it, but it is just so funny. Like if you look at the like intro cutscene to like when you're getting introduced to the stray sheep, that panning shot through the bar I think still looks so visually well, which does one of the hardest things in animation, I feel personally, is making 3D models not stick out like a sore thumb. And that shot still looks so good. And really, really tiny little nitpick, but I don't think I've ever said this publicly. At least in terms of the new cutscenes, I will say there's one that really, really stood out for me. And without getting into spoilers, the cutscene you get of basically both Catherines fighting for you, choosing Rin, that cutscene is fantastic. That is like one of the best new additions to the whole series.
The Catherine Arena meme.
Yes.
I love that scene.
Yeah, so moving on from a Catherine podcast, unfortunately, which this is not all about, we have one little bit of news, and then we have a main topic, which is the main reason why I invited you on the show. But I would be remiss not to start off with the news, mainly because it's very short, but it is still very important. So even though Persona 5 Scramble has been announced for, oh my gosh, almost 9 months now in Japan, and comes out in 2 as of this recording, it still has not been officially announced for a Western release, probably due to the fact that Royal just now got a release date and they didn't want to seem like they were announcing too many at once. But recently, Sega has trademarked the name Persona 5 Strikers, basically confirming the Western title is going to be dropping the Scramble. And I'm just kind of curious, one, what do you think of the assumingly Western name being Persona 5 Strikers, and overall, what is your general interest level for P5S?
I'm pretty excited for P5S. More like that, o sea, more than P5R, actually.
I mean, I can't blame you. It is a actual story continuation. The gameplay is a very, very interesting addition. It doesn't seem like, even though it is a Muso-like game, it doesn't seem like they're actually skipping out on the story, and if anything, it seems way more story-heavy than I think anyone would have even guessed a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, and P5 initially was intended to be an action game. That's true.
Now, I'm just curious, are you much of a Koei Tecmo fan, or have you played any of the other like Dynasty Warriors games before?
I have played all Fire Emblem Warriors.
Okay.
And One Piece Pirate Warriors.
Okay, so you've got the good spin-offs out of the way. The only one I would say that you're kind of missing in terms of really quality Warrior spin-offs is, if you like Zelda, Hyrule Warriors is like probably my favorite out of the whole series, and I'm trying to think that's not like just recommending like everything. And if you like Berserk Warriors is also really, really good, although I think that one's just called Berserk and the Band of the Hawks or something. But even though those games get a really bad rap, usually their spin-offs end up being the best ones. Like, I remember when I played Pirate Warriors for the first time, I was so amazed how it actually felt so much like One Piece, even though you're just knocking out like hundreds and hundreds of guys.
I got all the medals in Pirate Warriors. That was pretty fun.
I gotta say, I'm sort of surprised. I was Fire Emblem Warriors is actually my first Fire Emblem game I ever have owned or played.
Really?
I've somehow, after being a fan of all these RPGs for years and years and years, and I love the genre that Fire Emblem is, I've just never had one really call out to me. But my love of being like a Warriors fan, and especially because it was the team who made Hyrule Warriors sequel, I was so interested in Fire Emblem Warriors, and it really blew me away. But I haven't touched any of the DLC. I did the campaign, but I haven't touched any of the stuff in the season pass. But those DLC maps and stuff they always add like so many hundreds of hours.
They are like the Lucina Bride, and I don't remember the other characters.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Actually, I played Dale Survivor because I liked Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei.
I mean, yeah, it goes back to the whole Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem announcement of
Yes.
like when that game got announced, that was the definition of too good to be true, because those series have so much in common that the fans really wouldn't even notice until it was kind of available in a game. So going back though to Scramble, are you planning on probably picking it up for PlayStation, Switch, waiting and kind of seeing if there's any big differences, or what's your plan with that one so far?
I probably pick the PlayStation version for streaming, and then maybe I will pick the Nintendo Switch version.
I gotta say, I know I'm gonna own the Switch one eventually, but considering how honestly gorgeous the game has looked so far, I'm kind of growing more and more curious how it's actually going to run, just because by all like manners, at least in terms of like my opinion, I feel like Persona 5S is looking marketably better than like even P5R, at least in just a visual comparison. Like I look at Persona 5 R, and I can still see that at its base it was a really, really pretty PlayStation 3 game. Like, I don't think at the end of the day anything they added into Royal is something that they couldn't have still done on PlayStation 3, if that makes sense. But when I look at Strikers, I really feel like, obviously with the different style of gameplay as well, but the just prettier models and stuff, it just looks a lot more visually impressive.
And the areas like Sapporo um, are explorable like Shibuya in Persona 5.
And actually, yeah, bringing up Shibuya, you bring up a really interesting point. I kind of get why they want to drop the scramble in P5S and just make the S Strikers, but at the same time, the game's core like environments and story is based around that like Shibuya Square scramble, and it's kind of like tied so deep into it. It seems like a really weird thing to like kind of take out of the title. Like, it sort of goes back to I guess the closest comparison would be like the Arena games, where they basically the Japanese releases for those were Ultimax. Like, oh no, it wasn't Ultimax. It was
Persona 4.
Yeah, like Persona 4 Ultimania.
Ultimate in Mayonaga Arena.
Yes, like it had a mouthful of a title, and it like made sense to kind of shorten it, especially with like Ultimax. But
Ultimax was Persona 4, the Ultimax Sublet Code.
Like, I always kind of liked the longer showboaty title of them, and I understood shortening it to Arena and Arena Ultimax, but I feel at least with Scramble, it seems like kind of a weird thing of, it's already such a Japanese title at its core, Persona 5, especially Scramble being basically just one giant road trip around Japan. Like, in terms of, like, what's your opinion of, like, do you think it was a good idea to take out Scramble? Do you think they just kind of wanted to shorten the title? Like, what do you think?
I think that at least it's still P5S, unlike the Arena games. That the Arena games was the title was P4U and P4A in different regions. That at least that is consistent in this case.
Yeah, that is true. Because that was really confusing because the abbreviation of Arena in Japan was still P4U. So then when we got Ultimax, it was like P4UU in Japan and just P4AU over here.
Yes, and they usually drop the from the title of the games on the spin-off games. It's a usual practice of the Atlus West.
That's a really weird one I've never understood. Dropping the. Just because the Golden and the Royal, at least to me, I don't know if I feel like I'm almost like at the point where I follow like the Japanese side of the news and stuff so closely that I get so accustomed to the titles. Like, I just don't ever really see the point of why just call it Golden instead of the Golden.
I think that sounds better in Japanese, really.
Yeah,
like Persona 5
point.
Saroyaru.
Like, I always get confused actually at this point of if the original version of Devil Survivor 2 was originally in Japan it was Break Record, but in America in the West it was Record Breaker, right?
I think it's Break Record. Break Record in Japan.
Yeah.
And Record Breaker in America.
That was one I definitely kind of understood because like Break Record obviously is like a very Japanese-y title for that. The only one I always thought was a little odd was making Shin Megami Tensei 4 Final Apocalypse. I feel like Final really kind of made it sound like its own title, whereas Apocalypse just kind of makes it sound like a Golden, you know?
I saw the video with the people of Atlus USA brainstorming for the title. They had to maintain the A in the title.
I miss those days of Atlus like West with like John Harden and stuff and all of them, of like how much social facing they were by comparison of now. It's even so funny with like them being Atlus West now. It still to me just kind of feels like it is still Atlus USA with a name change. I've never really felt like Atlus, even when they did their brand change, has like been super globally minded in this, at least in the Western region senses, at least outside of when they announced the news for our next topic with P5R.
I think that Atlus West is just Atlus USA with the European branch, like Canada, USA, and Europe.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Well, I guess actually that might as well just go into our next topic, which I would not have guessed in a million trillion years would ever actually happen. So when Persona 5 Royal was announced, for the first time actually in my entire history of covering this franchise, I heard a incredibly large vocal amount of international users asking for other languages to be translated and not just to be English. And when the game got announced, it was pretty much quickly confirmed, no, it's still just English subtitles. And then out of, like, doesn't it feel like it was just almost out of really nowhere? Like, there was that rumor from Video Games Plus who had listed it as having multi-language support, and all of us basically being like, oh no, that must be an error. And then just out of nowhere the next day, we got a announcement trailer from Atlas West saying English support along with French, Italian, German, and Spanish.
Yes. Let me tell you a little story. The day of the Persona Super Live, the first day, April 2023, I think, right after the end of the concert, Atlus USA at the time dropped a Persona 5 Royal Spanish teaser. We are like, nah, that's not happening. That's not gonna happen. Atlus never translates his games. And then when the countdown page for P5R was launched, the page was in Spanish too. So maybe this will be, maybe. And then the day of the Q&A with Sarah Wellock in the fansite Discord, she said that the game will be English only. So I don't know why they hold on in the announcement.
It seems like unfortunately of like two sides, and one makes me very nervous, and the other one makes me, I guess, just disappointed. The less depressing answer, I hope, is just Atlas West being this huge corporate entity and them just kind of not knowing the size of all of their projects, and Sarah just didn't know. On the other side of things, it makes me really, really worried that this was announced for English-only release, and the international audience was crying so loudly this time, and the overall English reception was pretty negative, at least in terms of the release day, I remember, with fans basically all agreeing, hey, this is a terrible release date, and you're just kind of sending the game out to die, along with a whole bunch of other little things that then a week later, the EFIGS support is added in. I hope that this had been worked on for a lot longer, and I really, really want them to be putting a lot of effort into it. My worry is that they decided, hey, is this physically possible for us to get it done in like 3 months? And they're just basically going to make the everything besides English be like a rush translation job, which I really hope is not the case.
I don't think so, because all the promotional material was actually in Multi-5 since the beginning.
I guess it's one of those things as well of, I think, and also, apologies, I should have clarified this to begin with. I'm going to refer to, at least personally, the way I've seen it the most is just EFIGS, which is just English, French, Italian, German, Spanish. EFIGS support is one of those things that, unless you are in a PAL-speaking country, most people, at least in like the Western side of games and press, probably have no idea that's a thing. Because back in the day, at least I think during the PlayStation 2 era, it used to be almost demanded by, I think Sony used to actually demand a lot more games, at least have multiple languages, if not for the fact that, hey, we're releasing this game in Europe. Obviously, so many countries in Europe don't just speak English, so we're going to have to translate it into other languages.
Yeah, we in South America always get the USA versions,
Hmm.
so they always are English only, unlike
Well, and
the
that was
European
that
ones.
was the weird thing as well. Is I always remember North America, you would get lucky if there was a French version, and the French version was almost always there just for the like French Canadian speaking part of North America.
Hmm.
But yeah, so when that got announced, I feel like they have a lot of opportunity for this to be a huge press moment, and actually they've done a good job in terms of having that trailer play a lot. I've seen that trailer for Persona 5R pop up in my feed, and it's not just the hey, here's the release date trailer, it's the hey, here is the multi-language support confirmation trailer. I think if they like honed in on that a lot, they have a lot larger of a fan base who's going to be excited for Persona 5 Royal as opposed to the English speaking one because hey, there are these hundreds of thousands of people who don't understand or just don't like have the ability or at least like they do not speak or read English and they're missing out on this game series that they want to be a part of, and it would make it like so much easier for them. I feel like there's like such a huge market they could be tapped into. It just is kind of disappointing that I feel like it'd be like, hey, have a Q&A with the people who are working on each version of it. Like, say, what's it been like translating the Italian version, the French version, and like what's it been like if there's people working on both? Like, how big is that department? I feel like there's no information about this new addition to P5R that can't be good news. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know, I know.
Because I worry that this is going to be one trailer and we're never going to see anything about the translation quality until the game releases. And it makes me a little bit worried because obviously the translation for Persona 5, the vanilla version of it, was not the most universally loved thing. Had some errors and some liberties in the localization that people weren't a fan of. Hagane, for you at least, what was your kind of reception playing through P5R for the first time in English? Sorry, P5 for the first time in English.
I played P5 with Japanese dub, and I noticed some changes in the localization, like the Futaba code name, Navi to Oracle. I don't bother really. Some localization things like the fan site that is called Kaito Onigai Chaniru. I think that's pretty okay. I don't have many problems with P5 really. I thought that was pretty okay.
And just kind of curious, because I know there's, least to my knowledge, outside of the really, really big titles that get multi-language dubs and stuff, do you think if there was ever kind of like a social gauge or let's say like a hypothetical interest Kickstarter to, hey, all of these languages, do you want a natural dub and not just have subtitles available? Like, how much of an interest do you think there would actually be for that with P5R, at least in terms of the fans that you're aware of?
I think that in the Spanish case will be a divisive topic because the Spanish from Spain is pretty different from the Spanish of Latin America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
and unfortunately, I am a very, very, very white guy, if anyone here is not aware, or you. And basically, when it comes to Spanish dubs, my only knowledge is thinking probably Dragon Ball Z and Digimon. Those are about the only ones I have any
yes,
actual knowledge of in terms of, like, I know people like this, and I know some people have a problem with this.
yes, that's a pretty divisive topic.
Yes, especially
Yes,
Dragon Ball.
yes. I don't like the English Goku really.
See, that's the funniest thing. I remember the only reason I found out about the Spanish dub of Goku was I remember when the first Dragon Ball movie. Oh no, why am I forgetting the name? The first one with Beerus. I remember because that got a dub in Spanish
Battle of the
before.
Gods.
Yes, when
Battle of
Battle
the
of the
Gods.
Gods got a release first in Spanish, I remember I was like, why would the Spanish-speaking like dub version come out before the American one, and then I found out how insanely popular Dragon Ball Z is down there and how much they trash it on the English dub version up there.
I hear the people don't like the Japanese one too. It's a rare case. It's a rare case.
It's a weird one. If I can understand, like Dragon Ball is one of those odd cases for me where I grew up with all of my anime in English, like dubbed, that I can always do subbed. But if there are certain ones, especially like Dragon Ball, where the voices are so distinct, and like if you hear Goku speaking in English, speaking in Spanish, speaking in like even Swedish, or speaking in Japanese, they all sound so different. Like they all are different people. They don't seem like, oh, this seems like Goku with a Japanese accent. It's like, no, they are basically completely different people.
The thing that is always a worry for the community is the translation about the skills and code names. That would be a bad decision, I think. Like Kamehameha of Dragon Ball in Spain is like it's called the Onda Vital. It's like nothing like the original.
Oh yeah, and I'm trying to think what is the Spirit Bomb over there? Because I know Spirit Bomb is also very different.
Spirit Bomb is called Genki Dama.
Like yeah, that was the weird thing. Yeah, Genki Dama is the same in Japanese as it was in Spanish.
Yes, the same. They keep the translation of the Genki Dama.
So do you think, kind of going back to Atlas and Persona 5, do you think dubbing it would be worth it, or do you think they would have such a hard time making a dub that would like please people?
I think that will be a financial problem, really, a schedule problem because they. I don't know how Atlus USA, Atlus West works with Atlus Japan, but they usually take some time for make the dub worth it. Like I can say that I don't like dubs personally, but I have to admit that the Persona 5 dub is pretty good. It's one of the AAA dubs that is amazing, really.
Is there any recent example of English dubs that you really don't care for?
Like games?
Yeah, or anything. Just any
I think most
translation.
With stuff, I think. Very Japanese stuff. I think that's.
Like, how do you feel with I know like a big dubs versus the original. Contentious is usually with like the Final Fantasy games always get it a lot, and like Kingdom Hearts especially. Kingdom Hearts is a weird one where even
Kingdom Hearts is yes.
Where see, that's the weird thing. Whereas like Kingdom Hearts is, people either think the English dub is the best dub ever or is the worst dub ever.
I can't hear the Disney characters talking Japanese. It's super weird.
If you've never heard Donald Duck and Goofy speak in Kingdom Hearts with their Japanese dub, it's truly, honestly, whoever does Donald Duck's voice should get a medal, because being able to sound like a duck and somehow speak Japanese, it's impressive. It's not very good or pleasant for your ears, but it's at least impressive he can do it.
It works. It just works.
Oh my gosh. No, yeah, because that's one of the funny things I always see people bring up of they want EFIGS support with like multiple languages, but people don't ever really kind of specify, because I feel like what they say when they want that is, I want the Japanese version translated into Spanish, or I want the Japanese version in English. Because I so rarely ever, because I know at least for me, I have a very, very rudimentary, or like a very like childlike knowledge of how to write and speak and understand Japanese. So if I watch an anime that is dubbed in the original, sorry, if I watch an anime in its original Japanese voice acting, but the subtitles are for the dub, it's very kind of like confusing for me a little bit, you know, because you're hearing them say, I need to go to the grocery store, but the subtitles say, I'm hungry, let's go get some donuts. We're like, okay, I understand that, but like how that kind of, like how they kind of trip over each other, you know?
I think that's part of the localization process, really. I must say that I want to defend two titles with EFIGS support from Sega this year. One is Judgment, and the other is Catherine Full Body. I played both games with the original dub and Spanish subtitles, and I must say that they are Spanish of Spain subtitles, but they are pretty good. They didn't change much of the original script. They have some slangs here and there, but they are pretty good for, at least for me. I must admit that.
And I'm just kind of curious, because I know, at least for all the most recent Yakuza games, including Judgment, they've had multiple languages supported. Catherine Full Body, this is the first time it's had Spanish subtitles available, correct?
The original Catherine has Spanish subtitles too.
Okay. See, for whatever
That's
reason,
because
and this might have just been the North American one. I only distinctly remember it had a Japanese, English, and then French subtitles.
the North American one, the version who I played, it has only English subtitles, and the European one has EFIGS.
Okay,
Support.
and that, yeah, I guess that actually would make sense, because that did come out later through Deep Silver, so that would actually make sense, because it wasn't like day and date they were the same thing.
Good thing is that Atlus is focusing more in Europe. Like Shin Megami Tensei 4, I think that arrived in Europe like in 2014, 2015.
The very infamous wait for 2.5 years to pass and we won't even give you a physical. Here's the download option.
And I think that Devil Survivor 1 was broken in the European version.
Devil Survivor, so we're talking the DS one, not the 3DS?
No, 3DS one. The 3DS one was
Okay.
broken in release.
Huh.
I saw multiple European fellas
That's interesting.
in GameFAQs.
Because it's just one of those things of like, at least as like a natural like English speaker for almost all of my like media I consume, I just never really kind of think about it. But it's been so interesting, especially while researching for this video, how much demand there is for this and how few, especially for Atlus games, have actually ever supported it.
Yes.
Like, I'm sure you've probably come across this way more than I have just through trying to talk to people online. Like, have you ever met many fans out there who are interested in this franchise and this series, but have a very like hard time with English, and it keeps them from enjoying the games or the anime more?
People from my community always ask for Spanish subtitles. Always like, hey, when's Persona 5 will have Spanish subtitles? And the people say, oh, you don't know Atlus. They won't do it.
Oh, I mean, because I would love to hear what you think, but while researching for this, I found so many threads online of circa like the original release in 2017 of people so mad that the game had no Spanish like specifically Spanish. Like,
Yes.
people were so mad when that game finally released after all the delays and had only English subtitles.
The reviewers from Spain are especially critical with the Spanish subtitles. Like they lower the score if the game don't have the Spanish subtitles, and they wait until the price drop usually.
Oh,
That's
man.
how it works. That's how it works.
I'm curious, in terms of your, I'm trying to think of how really to like, I guess in terms of your community at the Velvet Network, how like, if you kind of had to guess, how much of it is like located in, like, let's say South America, or if any are in Europe and North America? Like, do you kind of have any sort of idea of, with your community, how big it is where you might live compared to other places?
We are like we're huge on Facebook because Facebook is used in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people are from Mexico, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, and I think that Spain. That's from the most people are in my community.
My favorite thing when I started this podcast back in 2012 was because we primarily have always been run out of our Facebook group. And my favorite thing about that has been seeing where all these people are located and where all the activity is. And I always remember being so blown away at the time of, I don't know if it's still the case, I looked recently, outside of North America and Japan, almost like tied exactly for third and fourth place is the Philippines and South America, specifically like Chile.
Yes,
Chile was a very big surprise, and like I mean there are many different like parts of like Asia and like Thailand and like Malaysia and stuff like that, but like how was like specifically like those two was like very surprising for me.
Filipinas is the Arcana project community,
Mm-hmm.
and Chile is principally my community, the Velvet Network. It was born in Chile and then expanded to the rest of the world, Latin America and Europe.
But yeah, it's just so funny like how like large all these like communities are without really ever getting a lot of chances to interact with each other unless we're sort of specifically looking for it. Like I know the gaming community, especially in like Mexico, like Central and South America, are really really big. Have you ever gone to any local like gaming conventions, or if they have anything like that over where you live?
Yes, we usually hang with artists, cosplayers, and take some photos, do some hangouts in the cons.
Well, because the reason I wanted to ask is because I'm always sort of surprised, especially now that Atlas West is trying to be a lot more globally minded. I feel like they go to 4 shows, basically. They will go to Anime Expo, E3, sometimes a PAX, usually in North America only, and then in Europe they'll go to MGM, which is kind of like their PAX for like England and stuff. But I know that there are these like huge like foreign language speaking like gaming conventions that just have these insane turnouts, especially in I'm forgetting what it's called, the one that is takes place in like Brazil. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's this like multi. Oh, sorry, what?
Let me.
But you know which one I'm talking about, right? It's just
Yes,
like their big like
that one.
multi entertainment one that they always have, and I always see every year like how many hundreds of thousands of people go there, and you would never see a company like Atlas go down there, but they have these huge fan bases, and I'm surprised that they don't really like. I think if they tried going to like bigger events like that instead of just focusing all their attention in North America, because well, North America has a large amount of people that they can get their attention to, and a large amount of their fans are here. It goes back to what I was talking about with the Persona 5 R announcement podcast I did with everybody for episode 150, of Atlas so rarely gives any attention to the West, and when they do, they pretty much think the West is 90% North America, 5% Europe, and 5% the rest of the world. Whereas, like, I'm sure there are just as many fans in Mexico alone as there are in North America for Persona.
Yes, the show is Brazil Game Show in
Yes,
Brazil.
yeah.
Yes, that's it.
BGS, I've like seen stuff
Yes.
for, is insane. Because I remember, I think I saw like some stuff there for like, I think Hideo Kojima might have been gone there recently for something, and I saw just like the size of it was just insane to imagine going to one of those.
It was huge. I saw many cosplayers in Brazil of my community there. I didn't go yet, but I.
But yeah, so sort of going back to that, like, not even just supporting obviously the games with multiple languages supports. Like, do you think that attending events and having more of like a worldwide presence like that, do you think that we have a chance of that happening? Like, do you think that's worth it for them? Like, would the fans kind of come if there was like one big, like, hey, we're gonna have a big South American like meetup for, let's say, like P5S or something?
I don't think that will happen because I don't think um, they found South America a profitable market. I think that, but I will still promote Atlus game in South America.
Mm-hmm.
I hope one day they will. If anyone at Atlus is listening this, I am here.
We're all basically glorified free PR for them in the international markets, anyways, whether they let us be or not.
I'm doing it for free. They are boosting Spain, and that's okay. Europe is a bigger market than for them than South America and Mexico.
Kind of going back to South America specifically with you, how is getting a physical copy? Assuming are you much of a physical collector, or do you do much digital buying for your games?
I'm a physical collector. I
Okay.
miss always the special teams of the pre-orders. That sucks.
So what is the process normally like for you in terms of sort of like getting a game? Just because I know, especially with South America, it's not as easy as it is like here, where we have any of the big like stores we could go to in North America. We could also just buy online.
I usually get a double dip Datus games, the Japanese versions and the American versions. Um, for the American versions, we have specific retailers that import the games, but it's not direct like in USA.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have like a supermarket with catering full body. You have to go a specific store to buy the game, and the price with all the import taxes are pretty expensive, really.
I was gonna say that was my next question for anyone who's not aware. Let's say for me and anyone in like in North America, the Persona 5 our collector's edition is about $90. How much is that probably going to cost you once you end up purchasing it next year?
I think like 150 probably.
Could be worse.
Which
You could be in Australia. They probably are the only place that has it worse than South America.
could be Argentina. They charge one two only for the steelbook.
Oh my gosh.
It's terrible.
I mean, you are, at least from the sounds of it, you're very aware though in terms of you having to import your copy from Japan and then also get the Western one. I have to be very, very motivated to double dip in terms of getting the Japanese one and also getting the Western one as well. When it comes to importing, what do you normally like look for? Are you just looking for the game's collector's edition? Do you ever try and get certain pre-order bonuses? Like what really gets you excited in terms of stuff to collect for?
I think the collector editions of Japan are prettier than the US, and I can have the regular case and the steelbook case of America. That is pretty good to me. I hope that Scramble includes a steelbook this time
Have you seen the one
for the PS4.
have you seen the one that the Japanese
Geo,
pre-order steelbook?
the EO one.
Mm-hmm.
That's gorgeous.
I
I don't.
am so excited to import that steelbook. That steelbook looks absolutely fantastic.
Yes,
I
that's gorgeous.
gotta say though, this will be one of the only times of me importing. Yeah, this will be the only time I've actually imported the game along with the steelbook, because all of the past GEO steelbooks I've always gotten just as the case. because I didn't want to import Royal. There was no real need. Plus, for anyone out there who does not know, Royal is like the equivalent of like $80 in Japan. It's not like it's a $60 game, so
it's not worth it really.
Basically,
that,
especially for me who's not even going to understand any of the story.
I must say that I usually import the games for do the review, because we don't really get any kind of support like review games. We do all the footage with the Japanese version, and then when the American version comes, we do the review with the footage of the Japanese version for releasing it faster. That's usually I do.
Do you have anything that is sort of like your white whale, or a particular item or a collector's edition that you wish you had or just haven't really been able to get recently?
The Persona 4 Golden Solid. That's pretty rare.
That one is very, very rare. I always tell people that is the last time an Atlas West game was actually rare and was tough to get. That one especially, I'm even actually looking at my case right now. I used that thing in the case that came with that edition on my Vita for 7.5 years before the outer shell of it actually broke off. And it wasn't even through just dropping it. It was just through repeated use of how often I actually play my Vita. So that was one of the most like emotional collector's editions for me that I'm really glad I got, because I got that like a week after I got my Vita for the first time, and I always think of when I got my Vita putting on that case, and I never took it off for almost a full decade.
Persona 4 Golden was the sole reason because I bought a Vita in the first place.
Oh really? Okay. When did you pick it up? Was it in early 2012 or right around Golden's launch?
2013, I think. I was still university student, and I couldn't afford the Persona 4 Golden at release with the Golden Solid. That was pretty sad.
I will say mine is not as heartbreakingly hard to get. I'm just like, have you ever had that like a mental kind of limit of, okay, I know I want this item, I should not pay more than this amount of money for it. The original GEO pre-order steelbook for Persona 5, that is the only steelbook from Atlas that I don't have. Unfortunately, it's gotten expensive over the last couple of years just because a lot of people didn't know about it. Like, Asian steelbooks are just really hard to track. There's not a lot of information really out there unless you're looking for it. The problem with that is I'm too stubborn to pay $100 for it.
Just like, for a solid steelbook.
Well, because it's just the case. That's the worst part. Is like I would pay if I found one like casing order that was like, hey, it's $90. I would like press that button and answer it. I shouldn't. That's way too much money for one case that I will literally never use outside of just having in my collection. But it just sucks because I have every single other one. I have the one for Catherine. I have the one for Dancing Star and Dancing Moon Knight. I have the one for Royal, which, oh my gosh. Did you get the one for Royal when you imported?
No, I didn't get the steelbook.
The steelbook for Royal is absolutely gorgeous. I really looked out. My girlfriend had got it for me as a birthday gift, and that thing is really, really nice because the back, if you've seen the design, is all
in the CD?
No, it's not the back of the case is all of the Confidant cards, the tarot cards. And in the middle is one of the calling cards, so all of the Confidant tarot cards are glossy, and the matte calling card is the Phantom Thieves calling card is matte, so it like sticks out really, really bright. That one is thankfully not as expensive as the GEO Persona 5 one, just because it's not as old in terms of its release. But yeah, so I'm glad that I at least have someone else outside of LaRue who imports a lot of things.
LaRue imported the Korean one.
Why? LaRue would import any edition variant he probably found. If he found like a South American exclusive one that came with a different receipt paper, he would probably import it. He has to have every little variant, which I appreciate him for, because this way, because I know him, I can feel like if he has something, I will never truly need to own it unless it's something like a steelbook or a collector's edition where I know I want it. Like, he has all the weird Mega 10 merch that I love to look at, but I would never want. Like, I don't need the digital Devil Saga laptops, but it is cool to know that someone has them.
The Nocturne laptop too.
Yes.
Yes.
Or like the digital Devil Saga memory cards. Like these things the things I would like never truly have a purpose for, but it's great to know that I know someone who has them.
The Nocturne one is pretty expensive.
Oh my gosh, almost any of those, especially like when it comes to the plushes and stuff. The amount of money that you can spend on just a single Jack Frost plush, as long as it's a couple of years old and is legit, is truly scary.
Yes.
But yeah, sort of I guess let's wrap up our conversation about P5R and its EFIGS announcement and sort of support. So let's say Atlas is listening right now. As a member of the international fan community, if they were listening to this right now, how would you recommend that they should handle not only this support in terms of Royal, but all of their other games going forward? Like, what would sort of be your final message to Atlas if anyone's listening out there?
I think that if Royal sells well in all the territories, they should keep into the EFIGS support. It's pretty well received with the community, alike in all the world, for all the Spanish speakers, Italian speakers, German speakers. Is always well received. Like, Atlus is not a niche company anymore, as you said in the last podcast. I think that that should be the way, that Persona 5 Scramble, Shin Megami Tensei 5, all should have the options. I think that more options make the games more accessible for all the people.
Well, yeah, and I'm also very, very glad that we thankfully do not live in a world where any of the consoles are region locked anymore.
Yes, that's the problem. That's the problem with Europe. The Europe in the 3DS era, the 3DS was locked, and they couldn't play Shin Megami Tensei 4 at release.
At least not legally.
Yes, at least not legally.
But yeah, so before we kind of move on to saying goodbye and everything else, we got 3 responses to this topic from Twitter. I wanted to kind of at least give a shout out really quick. First up, we had from Marikyo Aparo, longtime international fan of ours. He says, since English is not my native language, I never noticed the problems with P5's localization. But I'm curious about the Spanish subs. My guess is that they will translate them from the English script, but will the P5R script improve from the vanilla one? So we sort of talked about this a little bit earlier, and unfortunately all of the Western press that they've released for Persona 5 Royal has only shown all of the new footage. There hasn't been anything that we can directly compare yet. If you're basing this off of the English one, I think it is a really safe bet to say they're probably not going to go out of their way to make it any different from the vanilla one. I would love to be proved wrong, but at the moment we just don't really know. I think, at least just based on our conversation and everything from this, I think more people would be interested if the EFIGS translations were based off the original Japanese and not the localized English script. But, like I said, unfortunately, we just kind of have to wait and see. Next up from Juiced Up says, are the translations based on the Japanese script or the... or the Japanese script? I'm guessing our only options are Japanese or Japanese. I'm guessing English. Also gonna have to say, we have to wait and see. Probably English, though, unfortunately. And our final bit comes from Contrast Minds, who says, Spanish, neutral Latin America, Mexican Latin America, or European. I ask because the details can change a lot. When it comes to characters' personalities and the cast being teens, it is very important that it gets done right. No cringy, unrealistic, country-centric slang. Now, Hagane, can you kind of sort of explain for anyone out there who doesn't really know that? Because obviously I can say, hey, this movie is in Spanish, or it is translated in Spanish, but that is a really wide term of just like saying, just because if something's in French doesn't mean it's not like Montreal, like French-Canadian French.
How do you feel like with the dubs of United Kingdom, England? It's sort of like that, like Xenoblade Chronicles compared to a Persona 5 dub. It's like that's comparison. Like in Spanish, we don't, Spanish from Spain uses other terms or slangs that are different than Latin America.
And just curious, if just, and this is honestly just a personal question I'm just really curious about, what's it kind of like, let's say if I was like born in Latin America, but something was like natively translated in Spanish from like a Spain perspective. Like, is it kind of like, does it just make it harder to sort of understand and come to grips with? Is it still feel like it's a little bit like a different language? Like, what's that comparison really like from understanding it?
In the dancing games, that's the. I think that's the in the Persona dancing games, the Spanish script was not very appreciated by the Latin American community, but we have to understand that we are not the principal market of Atlus.
Mm-hmm.
We know that, but I still appreciate it, but I think that it could be more neutral, like Spanish from Mexico is like the most neutral Spanish in all Spanish-speaking country.
Okay.
But we always get the Spain one. I'm okay with it because more people will be will be picking the game.
Okay. Well, again, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking and basically A, doing this podcast with me, but B, also it's been really cool kind of following what you guys do, especially just because I've been doing this for so long in terms of like following this community. It's been really eye-opening to see different sides of the international like fan base and stuff that I normally never get to interact with.
I want to say thank you for inviting me to the glorious SMT network, like that say.
Well, it's very good now because at least I can say we've officially had more than just North American, European, Australian, and Japanese people on. We can at least have branched out to South America. Before I go and we say our goodbyes, I'm gonna leave you with two very hard questions. I'm gonna let you pick though. One is specifically Megami Tensei related, or the other one is Atlas related. Which one do you want first?
Atlus one.
Okay, that's the easier one. Okay, so 2019 is almost over. What is the best game and the worst game that Atlas has put out that you have played in the last 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, and why?
Oof. I think it's Catherine Full Body would be the best for me.
Okay.
I love it. And the worst, that includes the licensed titles?
Yeah, anything. I'll even give you RAPD the game, but you probably haven't played that.
I think Conception 2.
Conception 2? Oh no! Oh, see, this is why I saved it for the end. You just broke my heart. How do you pick Conception 2? You hold hands and make babies. Oh my gosh. Wow. See, that's why I love asking this question. I would never have guessed Conception 2 in a heartbeat.
I played most of the recent Atlus games from the last decade. And I must say that I enjoyed the most, with various grades of enjoyment.
I will say this. You are not the first person I have heard who's not a fan of Conception 2. It is not a game for everybody. But every time I hear that, I always feel just a little bit hurt by it, because I remember I went into that game knowing nothing about that series, and I know it wasn't my first Spike Chunsoft game, but it was really, really up there. Like, I did not know who they were at the time. They were just some weird, like, developer. I didn't even know what Danganronpa was at the time back then. So, yeah, Conception, a weird series where I've only played 2 and have no interest in touching the original.
I understand where you come from. Running a Vida podcast is like understandable.
Mm-hmm.
I love Danganronpa too.
Danganronpa is if that series was not over, I would love to talk about it, if not as much, at least just about as much as I do for Shin Megami Tensei. That series of Danganronpa has hit me so perfectly. But I was talking about this with Gnarly, who I don't know if he's still planning on doing a video about Danganronpa. It was very funny. I think his video at one point was going to be titled like why Danganronpa died, or why it like ended or something, or like why there's no more. Thing. Yeah, and I just thought it was so funny because I had to mention it to him. It's like, it just ended because they wanted it to end, right? Which is so funny because, like, I'm not even saying that as, like, a thing against him. It is so rare that a series, especially one that is popular and is well-regarded, just ends on its own terms.
I think that Danganronpa 1 and 2 were super low budget and sell pretty well worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And V3 was like the big budget Danganronpa game that ended everything.
I know Danganronpa V3 is very much a love it or hate it game. I'm on the sense of I love everything that game did because I was just along for the ride. I don't know how you feel about it personally, but I think V3 is easily the best in the whole series.
I think the same, that I love Kaito. Is my favorite character in the series. I know that Nagito Komaeda is better written, but I love Kaito. It's my favorite character. V3 is super stylish, and the cases were pretty fun too. The ending was like, what?
I mean, I think it's fair to say that every game has a what ending, except Danganronpa V3 has 9 what endings because it keeps ending and ending and ending and ending. But if somehow you've listened to this and don't know what Danganronpa is, if you own a PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, or personal computer, play those games immediately. They are absolute visual novel masterpieces. Even if you do not know what a visual novel is or those turn you off, those are like easily one of the best visual novels out there.
And support AI, the Somnium Files.
Yes.
Support Kodaro Shikochi.
Yes. That entire team, everyone needs to support. Also, just because we have to give a shout out, because we mentioned AI, do not sleep on the Zero Escape series.
Do not sleep in the Zero Escape and Tokyo Mirage Sessions.
Oh,
please.
Thank you. See, that I should have made that a question, but I feel like I've brought that up on so many episodes where at this point I'm just going to be harassing people for it. I could bring it up, but I do have to give you the actual serious question, which is not that serious. But considering this is our series is only, I guess, really Strange Journey is our only good multinational attempt at other characters, I have to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, you can explain why if you want, where do you rank, 0 being really bad, 10 being perfect? How does Jimenez rank for you?
What title?
Strange Journey.
Strange Journey. I think that the original is superior in some aspects. Like, I think I give a 8 to Deep Strange Journey and a 9 to Strange Journey.
I'm gonna assume that extra point just comes from the art. I'm just gonna.
Yes, the Kaneko art style is compared to the Atlus. I respect the Atlus art team. They are pretty good. They do good works, but the Kaneko art style is in another league.
Mm-hmm. It's just hard, especially when it's a remake changing the art style. It's hard not to have that jarring element for it.
Yes.
Another, by the way, failed moment, which I will never let Atlas West live down. They should have dubbed that game. It was the only game with a multinational cast, and it would have been the most fitting dub of all time, but they dropped the ball because guess what? They knew that game was not going to sell well.
As the original.
Yes, as the original, and as the re-release. That game unfortunately has like probably one of the worst sales records of any Mecha 10 game.
At this point of time, I think that Shin Megami Tensei is like the passion project of Atlus.
It's tough because of the way the teams are all split up. It's kind of weird. I classify Tokyo Mirage Session as still SMT. I think instead of like the passion project, I think it's the one where they know there's no reason to rush anything. 4 had a crazy long development. 5 is going to have still a very long development for it, but in the grand scheme of things, that team has never really let us down in terms of just a game being really universally disappointing and underwhelming. They've always like taken their time, and I always stress this enough, but I cannot believe how much I always have to reiterate this. Everybody, look at every SMT game that's ever come out. Those games were made on the world's tiniest budget for a AAA RPG. Now, give that same team Unreal Engine 4, this new HD system, and say, we need you to develop the 5th sequel in this like 30+ year series. No pressure. Like
no pressure, guys.
That team, I cannot imagine when they found out that like they were making SMT5 on the Switch. Like they were probably all extremely excited, but like moving over to a new engine and like the moment like someone had to like find out, they're like, guys, we can't keep using the pixel art anymore. Like, what? We gotta make
like
new demons.
The masters of the asset flips. Like they use Nocturne engine from Nocturne to Persona 4, I think.
Yeah. That engine got a lot of use, and also the engine for the entire DS era. They got so much use out of that engine. Also, it cannot. In case anyone is curious, I'm sure Atlas is smart and cheap enough to know. I bet every demon that you see from Persona 5 Strikers is just going to be in SMT5, because it is a HD looking-ish demon, and it is also able to run on the Switch. And Koei Tecmo has already shown that they are very good for using their services to make a lot of stuff with like Fire Emblem and stuff like that.
They have probably changed the illumination of the models, like Smash Brothers Ultimate, some change like that.
I really wish Atlas Japan did a lot more like kind of technical stuff when they go into promoting their games, as opposed to just look at the characters, they're so cute. I'd be like, oh,
I must say that Logi looks pretty good in HD.
But yeah, Hagane, thank you again so much for coming on. If you just want to take this moment, let everyone who's listening know where they can find you, and also the Velvet Network online anywhere.
You can find us in Twitter as Velvet Network, in Facebook too as Velvet Network, in YouTube when we upload some reviews and unboxings. We are about to unbox the Persona 5 Royal Straight Flash Edition, the faceplate for the PS4 Slim, and I think we're going to do the unboxing of the Persona magazine with the team. And you can find us in Instagram too, as the Velvet Network too.
Okay. And also, in case anyone is curious, I'll have all of your stuff on the show notes, whether it be YouTube or on the Facebook group. Everyone's going to be able to find you like that. If somehow you have made it through this podcast and have no idea what podcast you are listening to, you can find me on Twitter. I am at Torchwood4SP, but more importantly, you can find the show on Twitter. It is at SMT Network. You can also find the group on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/SMTN. And finally, if you want to check out my YouTube channel where I upload the podcast and other videos and stuff like that, you can just search Spencer Presley or Shin Megami Tensei Network. Trust me, I've looked. No one else is uploading under either of those. But yeah, thank you again for coming on, and I guess this is where I realize I've run out of things to say, need a drink, and we'll just say goodbye to everybody. So thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.
Yow, LV. Yow. 夢でキャンセルシー One, two, three, get lost in my sheets これは現実、それが dream 混ざる密度のこんなクリーンつながる仕組みは変と変人との関係はエンとエン原点とゴン結ぶ点と点あとはセンスで決まる運命の運命 Just like a nightmare 指折り数えてもきれいなヒストリー時間はないぜ兄弟それに外せば兄弟そんな正体登れるとこまで登ろうが後戻りはできないこの後悔ビッグなハウスにビッグなカーがなくても案外引っかかる押したり引ったりして落とせ頂上を目指してやつ挑めYeah